Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Eruvin Daf Dalid contains two main sugyas with a couple of sub-sugyas. The first main sugya is about the size of an amma in the halachos of mavoi, sukkah, and kelayim. This is the sugya which we began in Daf Gimel. We wanted to know if it's a 5 tefach amma or a 6 tefach amma. So we're just established that there's a machlokes between Abaye and Rava, what Rav Nachman said on the subject. Tomorrow we'll try to prove one side or the other, and then discuss whether or not it's actually a machlokes tanoim. Then within that, we will bring a pasuk about the mizbeach in the third Beis Hamikdash, and analyze which of those amos are 5 tefach amos and which are 6 tefach amos. Then we get to the second sugya, which is a statement that the chatzitza in a mikvah, mechitzas, which is walls, and shiurim, the minimum sizes for a lot of things, are all halacha Moshe Sinai without any source in the Torah itself. And the Gemara will challenge all three of those and try to find examples of the three. So first of all, and the machlokes between Rava and Abaye, what Rav Nachman said about the size of an amma. Some amos are 5 tvachim, some amos are 6 tvachim. Question is, when we say an amma in measurements, which one are we referring to? So Abaye said in the name of Rav Nachman that mavoi and sukkah are 5 tefach amos because they are maximum sizes, and therefore we have to use the smaller amos, while kelayim, which is the minimum size, is a 6 tefach amma. According to Rava, it has nothing to do with 5 and 6. They're all talking about 6 tefach amas. The difference is, when we say tefachs, do we mean tefach, which is the width of a fist? Do we mean where the fingers are tightly clenched, or the fingers are held loosely, which is therefore slightly larger? It ends up being about 1 etzba larger per amma, 1 finger larger per amma. So the Gemara now says that this machlokes between Abaye and Rava should be able to be figured out based on a brisa. The brisa says clearly that all the amos which are discussed are 6 tefach amos. You just have to be careful not to be too exact with your 6 tefach amos. That sounds like what Rava said exactly. 6 tefach amos. You just have to be careful that sometimes you don't squeeze your fists. So Gemara asks it on Abaye. It doesn't fit with Abaye. So Abaye says, no. When we said all amos, we didn't mean all amos. We meant all amos in Hilchos Kelayim. But other amos are actually 5 tefach amos. The Gemara says, what do you mean? Look at the second half of the brisa. Shimon ben Gamliel says all amos in Hilchos Kelayim are 6 tefach amos. If that's what he's saying, obviously that's not what the Tanna Kama said. So how could you say that's what the Tanna Kama said? So Abaye says, okay, you're right, I agree that the Tanna Kama doesn't fit with me, but Rav Shimon ben Gamliel clearly fits with me. He says that the amos of Kelayim are 6 tefach amos, and the other ones are obviously not. So you see, he says like me. So now the Gemara says, okay, we'll accept that, but let's see, is this a machlokes tanoim or not? According to Abaye, it's definitely a machlokes tanoim, because the Tanna Kama clearly is against him, and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is with him. According to Rava, the Tanna Kama is with him. The question is Rav Shimon ben Gamliel against him? So Rava says, no, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel was not arguing on the Tanna Kama, he was explaining the Tanna Kama. He didn't really mean to add anything about Kelayim, he just meant to tell you the second half of his sentence, which is that when we say that you have to be careful not to use exact tefachim, we mean not to clench your fists. We mean to use loose fists, and in Hilchos Kelayim you use loose fists. That's why he said Kelayim. So the Gemara says, so then let him just say Kelayim, you use loose fists. Why does he have to say the whole 6 tefach amma thing? Obviously, he means to say that there are other amos besides kelayim, like mavoi and sukkah, which is a 5 tefach amma, which is against you. So obviously, he is arguing on you. So it is a machlokes tanaim. So Rav says, no, he's agreeing with me when he's excluding something else. He's excluding the amos in the mizbeach, the third mizbeach, which will be built in the days of Yecheskel. And perhaps it also applies to the other mizbechos which we had, that there are some measures in that mizbeach which are 5 tefach amos. Which ones? So the Gemara quotes the pasuk in Yecheskel which describes it, and then the Gemara explains it. The pasuk says as follows: "Ve'ela midus hamizbeach." These are the measure of the mizbeach ba'amos, in amos. Which amma? Amma v'toifach. An amma which you can fit a tefach in amma plus a tefach into another amma, meaning a 5 tefach amma, which you can use that plus another tefach to get to a 6 tefach amos. So we're describing now clearly using 5 tefach amos. So what do we have? We have a chek amma, the chek, which is the yisoid. We'll describe it in a minute. That is 1 amma high. The amma roichav. Then you have an amma width. Ugvula asfasa saviv. And then you have the higher layer that's also. And then zeras echad v'zeh al gav hamizbech. And then you have the back of the mizbech. So what are all these things? So the mizbech was built lahavda like a wedding cake with different layers, which each subsequently higher layer smaller than the layer beneath it, which was wider. So the bottom layer was called the Yisai, that was the widest, and that was 1 amma high, and that's what it's referring to when it says the chek. That 1 amma was a 5 tefach amma. The next was the lower section of the mizbech itself. That was 5 amos high. Cheskel doesn't say anything about that. But the next above that was smaller, which means that there was a ledge between the second layer and the third layer that the Kohanim could walk around. That ledge was called the Seivev. The width of that ledge was 1 amma in a 5 tefach amma. That's the next thing which Yecheskel describes. Then we have again the third layer. Then on top of that there are the corners. The corners stuck up, each corner almost like a horn, stuck up a square amma, a cubic amma from the corner. Now that cubic amma was a 5 tefach amma, both in height and in width in each direction. And then the last phrase, al gav ha-mizbeach, was a gav ha-mizbeach. That's referring to the mizbeach hazav, the Ketaris mizbeach that was also measured in 5 tefach amos. That is what Yecheskel was referring to, and that therefore is what Rav Shimon ben Gamliel was coming to exclude from, that those are the only things that are not 6 tefach amos. Okay. Now the Gemara launches into a different related subject. Rav Chia bar Ashi says, in the name of Rav, there are 3 areas of halacha that are halacha l'meshmi Sinai, by which he means there is no limud, there is no source for it in the actual written Torah that we could find. We just, Moshe Rabbeinu was told it on a Sinai. It's deraisa just like anything else, but it is not actually derived. What are those 3 areas of halacha? Shiurin, minimum sizes. Chatzitzin, what blocks water from reaching things in a mikvah, and mechitzos, what counts as a wall in halacha. Now, the Gemara wants to explore each of these 3 areas to see, is it really true that there's no sources for these? So the Gemara begins by saying, what do you mean? There is definitely a source for shiurin, for minimum sizes. What's a source? There's a pasuk in Parashas Ekev, Eretz chitus oira, V'gefen u'sein of Erimain, Eretz is shemen u'devash. This lists the 7 species of Eretz Yisrael, the 7 special fruits that Eretz Yisrael is praised with. But that is not necessarily what this pasuk is about. The Gemara brings that Rav Hanan says that all these fruits are used to identify sizes. What are they? So chita is wheat. Wheat is the following issue. Somebody who walks into a house which has tzaras, when he is in the house, so he becomes tamei, and anything he's carrying becomes tamei. But the clothing that he's wearing, the shoes on his feet, doesn't become tamei unless he's in there long enough to eat a loaf of wheat bread. And it's only wheat bread, not barley bread, and therefore the halacha of wheat is here. And it also has to be that he's eating it sitting down, together with some side dish. That makes the bread go down faster. That's the halacha of how long he has to be in the house in order for his clothing that he's wearing to become tamei. So that is the significance of wheat. What's the significance of barley? That a piece of bone the size of barley is metame somebody who's carrying it even if he's not touching it, but it's not metame everything in the room. It's only metame because of carrying. What's the significance of grapes? So this is a machlokes Rishonim here exactly how this works. According to Rashi, this is just that we use a revius for wine. Tosfos asks that that's not a share that you're learning from the grapes, and he says that grape materials use the shear of a revius of grape wine, as far as when a nazir is not allowed to eat them. Okay, now what's the significance of the shear of figs? That is the minimum size to be violating an Isur D'Oraisa if you carry it in the street on Shabbos. A rimain, a pomegranate, that's if a kli breaks, it has a hole in it that's large enough for a pomegranate to fall out, that kli is now useless. There is nothing else that can be used for if even pomegranates can't be stored in it because they fall out, and therefore it's completely useless and it's garbage. Olives the Brisa says is all shiurim. The Gemara says it's obviously not all shiurim. We have all these other shiurim. The Gemara says no, it means most shiurim. And the dates, that refers to a koseves, which is a large, oversized date, which is the minimum size to be chayev kares for eating on Yom Kippur. So you see that all these shiurim are clearly written. So how could you tell me that shiurim are only halacha l'moshe misinai and not written anywhere? So the Gemara says, what do you mean? There's nothing written here. It doesn't tell you anything. You're having a nice asmachda, a nice support for shiurim that you knew already, but you can't learn anything out of these. This doesn't say what the shiur is or what it's for, so this is not an actual source. This is just an asmachda, a hint, but it's not a real source. The Gemara now moves on to the second area of halacha, which is chatzitza, which is the halacha that you cannot have something blocking water from a mikvah from reaching your skin or part of a kli that you're trying to be metaher by tevila in the mikvah. And the Gemara says, how could you tell me that the laws of chatzitza aren't written anywhere? The fact that you can't have anything blocking the halacha of chatzitza is learned out of the pasuk. The rachatz b'mayim is called b'sarai. We learn out of there. It says b'sarai, that means that the water has to reach every part of his body. We learn out of the fact that it says b'mayim that the water has to be mikvah water. It doesn't have to be spring water. And we learn out of kol b'sarai that you have to be able to fit it all in at once. So how can you tell me? You see that the source of the halacha of chatzitza is learned out of here. So the Gemara says no. So you're right. The basic halacha says the halacha l'moshe misinai, which doesn't say is the halacha of hair, because we have a halacha that if a hair is knotted and the water can't get to it, that itself counts as a chatzitza. And I would not have thought that hair is not included in bisara. It's not included in skin or flesh. That's halacha l'moshe misinai. And agav, we have a statement here as far as what the halacha is, that if one hair is tied on itself, that's a very tight knot, that's definitely a chatzitza. If two hairs are tied together, we're not sure. If three are tied, it's not a chatzitza. It can't be tied tightly enough to keep the water out. So the Gemara says that's not true. The halacha of hair is also learned. The pasuk says es kol basari. The extra word es is to include hair. So the Gemara says, okay, I was referring, I guess, to a different halacha. The halacha of how much is a chatzitza. And the halacha is as follows. It depends on two factors. It depends if it is covering if the interfering material is covering a majority of the body or minority of the body, and if it's something that bothers you, you care about, and you would want removed, something that you don't care. And the halacha is as follows. Mida oiraisa, it's only a problem if it's both conditions. It's a majority of the body and you care about it. Mida rabbanon, if you have one condition and not the other, it's also a problem. Gzeira atu, the case where you have both conditions. So if you have majority of the body that you don't care about or minority of the body that you do care about, that's both aser mida rabbanon. The Gemara asks, well, what if you have neither condition? You should still make gzeira. He says, no, that would be gzeira to gzeira. That would mean that I would have to get confused from 0 conditions to 1 condition, which itself is derabanan, so that you shouldn't get confused. If you have both conditions, we don't make a gzeira on top of another gzeira. Okay, the third area of halacha, which we said was halacha l'moshe misinai with no source in the actual psukim, was mechitzis. That means walls. What counts as a halachic wall? That is relevant to a lot of areas of halacha, particularly how do you create a sukkah or an eruv. So Gemara says, how could you tell me that the halacha of walls is halacha l'moshe misinai without a source? The basic halacha of walls is that it has to be 10 tvachim high to divide areas to count as a wall. Well, we have a source for that 10 tvachim high. What's the source? The aron. The aron in the Mishkan was an amma and a half. At a 6 tefach amma, an amma and a half is 9 tefachim, and the kaparos, which is the lid, was 1 tefach. It's a total of 10 tefachim. And we learned from there that a wall has to be 10 tefachim high, because the Shekhinah only went as far down as 10 tefachim, because it rested on top of the kaparos. Every area under that is called man's rishos, and that's what you have to divide. So that's why you have 10 tefachim. So it's clear then that a wall has to be 10 tefachim high. So what do you mean where it's halacha l'moshe misinai? So the Gemara says, well, the truth is that the kelim were made with 5 tefachamos, and therefore it's not a total of 10 tefachim, it's 8.5 tefachim. 8.5 tefachim. You have 5 in the first amma and 2.5 in the 1.5 tefachim is 5. 1.5 amos, is 5 tefachim plus 2.5 tefachim is 7.5 plus another tefach of the lid is only 8.5. So you need the extra tefach and a half. That's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So the Gemara says, good. What about according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the kelim, meaning the aron, was also using 6 tefach amas? Then you don't need this. So the Gemara says this is for the other halachas of walls, and that's that you can extend the wall upward, you can extend the wall downward, and you can bend the wall in Hilchos Sukkah, and you can also have lavud, which means you can fill in the gaps. All these are halachic concepts which don't say anywhere that we learn halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The Gemara now begins a new sugya, which is all the way at the end of the daf. We'll just start it and take a sneak peek for daf hey. The Gemara says, okay, let's go back to our beam, which we used to make a sign at the end of the mavoi. The beam is too high. It's more than 20 amas high. So I want to decrease its height by building up the floor. I want to make a threshold under that beam so that the gap between the threshold and the beam is less than the 20 amas. How much do I have to build a threshold? So the Gemara says, what kind of question is that? How much? Enough that the gap isn't 20 amas high anymore. The Gemara says, no, that's not what I was asking. I was asking how deep into the mavoi do I have to extend my threshold? So the Gemara says that's a machlekes. Rav Yosef says 1 tefach, Abaye says 4 tvachim. The Gemara would like to know what they're arguing about, and that will be our leading discussion for daf.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.